Welcome into crushthestreet.com. I'm Kenneth Amaduri, and what an opportunity I have today. You know, digital currencies are super hot right now, and I have really Bitcoin legends on the line with me as we speak. We're doing a four-way call right now, and I wish I could have more on the line. I've gotten to know some really great people throughout the last couple years, and I wish I could, have about 10 different people on this call, but that's just impossible. But really, I have the who's who in Bitcoin right now. Trace Mayer, one of the first bloggers to recommend Bitcoin in its infancy, an investor, an entrepreneur. You guys know him. He's with the Bitcoin Knowledge podcast. And quite frankly, if I had to guess who's Satoshi, I would say it's probably Trace. But also, Tone Vays is on the line with me as well. I just spoke with him a week ago, and he really touched on the block size debate and his support for SegWit. And we're going to get into that with him today. He's with the Crypto Scam podcast. And he's also featured along with Trace in Magic Money. His website is libertylifetrail.com. And I also have Dave Scotese on the line, a very successful Bitcoin dealer facilitating transactions and really out there building the Bitcoin infrastructure. His website where he blogs is litmocracy.blogspot.com. Everyone, I'll just say hello. And we'll get to each person. But I first would like to start off with Tone. Tone, I know you and Roger Ver had a debate a while back, and it's been going on. I actually spoke with Roger Ver after our interview that you and I did. And I'd like to give you an opportunity to respond to it, and then we'll get both Trace and Dave's feedback as well. One of the things Roger said is you are okay with Bitcoin having $100 fees, and I know you're in support of SegWit and he's in support of Bitcoin Unlimited. Let's just kind of start there and get your thoughts on this.
Sure. Well, when I made that statement of me being okay with $100 fees, I meant it as it's a better alternative than having to explain Bitcoin to people. So my first choice, of course, is for Bitcoin to scale with SegWit, and that should immediately drop the fees down to very little. Well, at first, it should drop the fees by a little bit, but then when you're able to build second layer scaling solutions on top of SegWit, it should drop the fees by a lot. But if we're not able to get SegWit, I will take the current situation. At least that was my view of taking the current situation before we discovered that there is this thing called ASIC boost that gives some miners a technological advantage, and I'm not all crazy about that. So before knowing that knowledge, I would have been okay with status quo, nothing changing, and fees would go up, and fees could get to as high as $100. Probably not, but it's possible. And I'm not for this. I don't want $100 fees. In fact, the other day I wanted to move some Bitcoin from one of my wallets to another, and the fee was $3. And I just said to myself, you know what? It's not worth it. I don't need it that bad. Let me not even do that. And also the other day, someone sent me a little bit of Bitcoin, and it took 4 days for the transaction to get confirmed. And a few years ago, this would definitely take less than 10 minutes or 10-minute max. So no, these things are unfortunate, and the longer we delay SegWit, the worse these things are going to get, because SegWit is the only safe solution to solve these problems. So that's kind of my general view on it. I don't want to be in a moral hazard position of trying to do a hard fork, creating a big block, and splitting the network into two. I think that would be a lot worse than a $100 transaction.
And that actually makes a lot of sense. But I'll kind of pass this over to Trace. And if I can, semi-advocate for Roger here, I think he's just saying, hey, Bitcoin has some problems, and this is just an advancement for Bitcoin. It's a change that we can do. and we move on. And I guess all of us, or me particularly, I own Bitcoin, and I'm scared that my investment is going to go down if we split it into two, and I think that's the concern for everybody here. But is that also a selfish motive to not improve Bitcoin and allow technology and progress to take place? Trace.
Yeah, so it's definitely a complicated question, and I don't necessarily fault anybody for acting in their own short-term economic interest. I think that is part of the game theory with Bitcoin. However, there are a lot of stakeholders all at work, and they're all pulling on Bitcoin in their own direction. And what this does is it actually makes Bitcoin stronger. It makes it more anti-fragile. And what we're seeing is, with this ASIC boost issue, and just for the timeline, if we kind of look at the timeline, I talked about on several podcasts, even last year, that we're going to have SegWit. We'll probably activate SegWit or be getting close to activating SegWit, hopefully around like March, April, May timeframe. Here we are. We're still not necessarily that close, but I think we're getting closer. And March 20th, a month after Anarchapulco, where I'd gone down and met with Roger and had some talks and everything, I did an interview with Jeff Berwick about this potential hard fork, and letting everybody know, like, hey, look, I just don't think there's that much of an issue here. And if one of the reasons that Jihan is not activating is because of ASIC boost, then perhaps we're going to have to find another way to get this done. And then, about a week or a couple weeks after that interview with Berwick is when Greg Maxwell came out with his post about ASIC boost and how Timo Henke and Sergio DeLerner, who hold the patent on ASIC boost, have not licensed it to Bitmain, and how Bitmain could, well, Greg didn't specifically name Bitmain, but how an unnamed miner could be using a covert form of ASIC boost to increase the profitability of their mining operation. And that, sparked off this major controversy and discussion and everything that's going on in the realm. So I kind of intuitively looked at this through the economics and like, hey, maybe what explains all of this is it has to do with ASIC boost. And then Greg Maxwell actually does the reverse engineering and like, oh, this actually could be technically possible and could be what is happening. And so now the issue that's coming before the Bitcoin community is, do we just make it not possible to engage in this covert form of ASIC boost? And then the ASIC boost issue evaporates away, and then what's the reason for not activating SegWit? And there are several other potential ways that this could play out also. There's been BIP 148, which would be a user-activated soft fork. And when we look at the Bitcoin network, we have about 55,000 nodes, according to Luke Jr., who probably has the most accurate numbers for figuring this out. And 51,000 of them are running SegWit-compatible software. Plus, a lot of companies and the economic majority have already put in a lot of effort and a lot of money and a lot of time into being SegWit compatible and whatnot. And so if we have just one tiny actor in the ecosystem who is holding up all of this development that's happened for the extensibility and being able to upgrade and increase the usability of Bitcoin for their own selfish motives of making a couple $100,000 a day at the expense of the Bitcoin community, well, that's where the rest of the Bitcoin community is able to be like, oh, well, we're going to stop the ability to perform covert ASIC boost. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about doing a user-activated soft fork. We're going to come up with a plan to be able to do that type of stuff. Or, the nuclear option, we're going to work on changing the proof of work algorithm, which you'll notice Bitfury went into absolute conniption fit when that even got mentioned. They were like, we're going to sue anybody who even talks about proof of work change.
Wow.
Because think about it. Bitfury's raised $100 million plus from their investors. And if Bitmain really is blocking all this development and blocking the entire ecosystem for their own selfish motives, and Bitfury ends up being collateral damage because of that, So anyways, I think it's just fascinating. We're getting to see how all of the game theory and all of this actually makes Bitcoin stronger, more resilient. It shows that you can't just, even if you've got $100 million, you can't just use Bitcoin as your own little plaything. It's actually a fascinating experiment what's going on here, and I think it actually shows the resilience of Bitcoin.
Sure.
And status quo is a win, because status quo means that Bitcoin isn't changing, right? So the fact that we're not upgrading the system, but that the system's just staying where it is, that's actually a win. That should give confidence in Bitcoin.
Interesting.
So, I look at this and because it becomes sound money. It's another day that's passed that Bitcoin hasn't imploded, that it hasn't changed, that it's doing what it should be doing. And that first network effect of digital gold, of store of value for speculators, long-term store of value, that's our most primordial network effect. That's the one we should guard with all of our fervency. And so, the fact that Bitcoin is not changing despite all of these people massively tugging in different areas with a lot of money. I mean, we're talking Bitfury $100 million, Bitmain probably $100 million plus, Rogers tugging with a bunch of money. We got the core devs, we've got long-term holders, we've got exchanges. I mean, we got BitPay, merchant processors. Everybody's tugging in their own way, and it's actually, in my opinion, making Bitcoin more resilient. I think it's actually a very good thing that's happening.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's giving people a reason for confidence in it. So that's kind of my take on it is, at the end of the day, if Bitmain is trying to stifle innovation and upgrade to the Bitcoin network so that they can covertly ASIC boost and make an extra, 15, 20% on their mining, all the power to them, being good entrepreneurs. But keep in mind that you're doing that at the expense of the rest of the Bitcoin community. So one, you're not making any friends. Two, you're actually milking the community and exacting rents or transaction fees from them. And three, you're stifling all this innovation. And so you might get shaken off, real quick. As soon as the community wakes up to this, because mining is just a little bit of the Bitcoin community. We've got long-term holders, we've got all the VC investment, we've got companies, we've got people with stock options in these companies. There are now millions of people that are in the Bitcoin community. There are hundreds of thousands that are full-time with their employment in it, and there are billions of dollars that have been invested into it. And so if you it was funny because at lunch Roger was like, well, what do you think about the $100 million that the Chinese miners basically threatened to attack the chain with? And I was like, Roger, I don't think you get it. 100,000 Bitcoins isn't cool. You know what's cool? 300 to 700,000 Bitcoins. That's cool.
Wow.
And even if you've got 300 to 700,000 Bitcoins, and notice I'm denominating this in Bitcoins, not in dollars, because you got to actually be able to acquire the Bitcoins without moving the price, right? Even if you got 300 to 700,000 Bitcoins, you're still just a tiny, I don't want to say tiny, but I mean, you're not that huge of a stakeholder in Bitcoin anymore. The community, the ecosystem, the industry is just so much larger now. So I'm just not worried about this type of stuff. If you build a little dam with your covert ASIC boost, all this water is just going to keep piling up behind it, and eventually it's going to overwhelm your dam, and it's just going to your dam's going to get completely obliterated, and the innovation is going to continue to flow. And Bitcoin's got all these network effects, and so you kind of fight the market at your own peril. I mean, I understand wanting to get that extra $200,000 a day in transaction fees, but would you rather get that, or would you rather like have long-term relationships and stuff like that in the ecosystem? It really, it's definitely lots of different factors to weigh.
Trey, so we're going to circle back to you. I have a couple things I do want to ask you that kind of follow up on that. But Dave, let's move on to you, and I'd like you to respond to that. And if you think that basically right, Bitcoin, hold on, if you think Bitcoin is more resilient dealing with all of this, or are we going into a roadblock ultimately because more and more people are transacting and fees might go up? Just curious some of your thoughts on that.
Well, I totally understand your fear of, Bitcoin is gonna be harmed by this, but Trace is absolutely on the right page. I totally agree. It makes it stronger. It makes it more resilient. If everybody keeps arguing and everything stays the same for another 10 or 15 years, Bitcoin's awesome. Bitcoin's king. Bitcoin wins. Yay. Okay. Do you understand that? People aren't going to understand that. But that's the case. Imagine we stay in this situation for another 15 years. Bitcoin fees go up to $100. Well, what if you have a bunch of Bitcoin, you're not going to spend it unless you're going to buy a car or a house, something expensive. But guess what? You can, and it was virtually free. Okay? Everybody who has Bitcoin, do you understand what I'm saying now? I think you probably do. Okay, what were my notes? I have Litecoin. Litecoin is basically Bitcoin, and SegWit, I think, is already, it's on the way in Litecoin, and the difference in code is tiny. And the core team does Litecoin development, not on purpose, because they do Bitcoin development. And everything they do for Bitcoin, they're doing for Litecoin because it's shared code. Okay, so is Litecoin going to replace Bitcoin in this nightmare scenario of Bitcoin staying exactly the same for 15 years? Well, hey, maybe it will. Maybe it's time to start buying Litecoin. I just sold all of mine because I don't think that's the way it's going to go. But, full disclosure, yeah, I don't have any. But if that's what you think, then start investing in Litecoin. But that's one solution. What's another one? Bitcoin was invented because the money systems of the world are killing us. And some person or group realized that and said, hey, we can do this with cryptography. So, let's build this code. And they did it, and now we have it. And that's Trace kept saying Bitcoin, and I kept thinking, well, it's crypto. It's not necessarily Bitcoin because of these problems and advancements are coming in Litecoin, Dashcoin, Monero. Go down the list. There's lots of options. And there's this term Bitcoin maximalist. That can be used as an accusation, but I think it's more of a warning. Anybody, there might be a few people who would admit, oh yeah, I guess I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. Well, be careful with that because we are replacing PayPal. We're replacing wires. We're replacing banks. We're replacing all kinds of institutions. That's what Bitcoin is doing. And technology is going to keep doing that. And it's not just in money, it's in everything. So be careful if you think of yourself as a Bitcoin maximalist.
Sure.
So the next thing I wrote was patent. Patents and coercion. Again, going back to why Bitcoin was created is because these people who have the authority to hurt us for breaking their rules, we don't like them controlling our money system, and so we like Bitcoin instead. And in the same spirit, they're trying to control their ability to hash with this ASIC boost thing. And the fact that somebody holds a patent on some technology, I don't know if the patent is real, then it can be researched so people can understand how that works, and they can copy it, and they would have to do this under the radar on the black market, and maybe ASIC boost chips are going to start showing up that were not authorized, and you get caught running a machine that's got one of these in them, then you're going to be fined by some coercion, some authority somewhere. I mean, I don't know. That's another whole section of the game theory that it's fascinating to me because I don't have any. That knowledge is out there, and they're trying to use the patent system. And I think a lot of people recognize that the patent system it's playing with fire, because when you decide I want to have this patent and here's what I'm patenting, that's public knowledge now. Nobody's allowed to use it, which is kind of stupid. But you're playing with fire. Everybody has it now. Somebody wants to use it in secret. You made your bed. Now you have to sleep in it.
Sure.
So I see that potential threat solving the ASIC boost problem. And I'm out of responses to Trace. I don't remember what your question 10 was.
No. That's good, and you gave us some perspective on that. I want to move over back to Tone. Tone, you obviously think the hard fork would be absolutely detrimental to Bitcoin, and I want to
be more certain.
But I want to kind of just, and I'm not taking his stance on this, but I want to pose the question that, he's saying it's just an advancement. It's just the next step of Bitcoin. And one of the things that he said people would do is we would get our two Bitcoins, two versions of Bitcoin. You would sell one and buy the other one, and there's your new direction for Bitcoin. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, Roger has or anyone has any ability of what's going to happen going forward. I mean, Ethereum thought that Ethereum Classic would last maybe a day or two. They even forcibly sold the Ethereum Classic that people were supposed to get, and they didn't get it, and they just sold it to crash that market. And guess what? Ethereum Classic still exists. And there is a chance that in the future it will become more important than Ethereum. No one can possibly know how two Bitcoins are going to react in an economic setting. And this is not something you want to experience. This is not something you want to play around with. I mean, we're talking $20 billion or whatever the current Bitcoin market cap is. Haven't really been, about $20 billion worth. I also want to second the fact that if nothing changes in Bitcoin, I also see it as a good thing. It means we have a stable currency. People talk about how governance is important. It's just something they made up. Look at what happened with Ethereum. The moment the going got tough, everyone called Vitalik, and he went ahead and hard forked, and now there's two of them. The fact that it's hard to change things in Bitcoin, to me, is an indication of strength in Bitcoin stability than any kind of detriment. I also want to comment on a couple of things that Trace said. Maybe after I finish, he can briefly comment on it. You kind of said that ASIC boost is no longer a big deal. I think it's a very big deal as far as ASIC boost. I don't think those issues went away at all. And also, Bitmain is a pretty big player. I mean, they in the system, they're the biggest chip maker. So I'm not sure what you meant by that, Trace, when you called them not such a big player. I think they are. As far as a Litecoin goes, Litecoin is benefiting hugely right now from the possibility of getting SegWit. Litecoin doesn't even need SegWit. Just the fact that they can adopt SegWit and start testing Lightning, which is something we need in the Bitcoin space, the fact that they can do it has just caused Litecoin to have, a new high that it hasn't seen in 3 years. And this isn't a speculative high. This is actually, they're adopting useful code. Bitcoin on Bitfinex anyway just hit a 1 month high right now as well. I mean, people want SegWit. There's just a huge correlation. Every time this Bitcoin Unlimited theme starts to gain any momentum, the price of Bitcoin just drops. It's such an obvious correlation. If SegWit was to start becoming a reality, the price of Bitcoin will probably double in a week or two. Again, it's hard to predict the future, but from all that I've seen of the price going down every time Bitcoin Unlimited gets momentum. And one final point, when people say that, if you go to a hard fork and you just upgrade, it's, you're advancing technology. You're not advancing technology, because Bitcoin Unlimited is built on a year-old code base. There have been over 50,000 line changes. There have been hundreds of commits. The current SegWit code is running on version 14.0. and of the Bitcoin code 0.14, and Bitcoin Unlimited was built on version 0.12.1. So you're literally setting back Bitcoin development by over a year of 100 people developing versus the 12 people there are in Bitcoin Unlimited. You're literally setting Bitcoin back at least 2 years immediately by going with Bitcoin Unlimited.
Trace, would you like to respond?
How
Go.
much of that 2 years is how much of that 2 years is already it's available to Bitcoin Unlimited to merge in? I mean, there's code merging, and I know that's tough, but it's very tough. They can break whatever they did with Bitcoin Unlimited. They can't just merge it. They have to rewrite it from scratch, and they have less than 10% of the people to do it compared to what was done to write it, and nowhere near the, I don't want to be offensive here, nowhere near like the skill set of those developers. Like, I'll take the 50th ranked smartest Bitcoin Core developer over the best Bitcoin Unlimited developer.
Well, and that's why they're working on Bitcoin Unlimited, is because they're just not good enough to work on Bitcoin Core. They're the high school junior varsity bench warmers, and then you've got Jordan's Bulls, right? I mean, this is literally the case. Like when they found one of the bugs in when they were working on the OpenSSL bug and then disclosed it, like the OpenSSL team rolled it in, and it literally helped make 35% of the websites on the internet more secure. So the Bitcoin Core team has, it's undisputed that that's where the brain trust is. And at the end of the day, money follows management. So money's going to follow the best devs. And if you're not among the best devs, then you go work on something else. You go work on Dash or Monero or Bitcoin Unlimited or Ether or whatever it is. Not that those projects aren't good or that they aren't doing something useful. And I agree with Dave in the sense that, we shouldn't necessarily be Bitcoin maximalists. It's one of the reasons I interviewed Evan Duffield, who's the lead developer on Dash, when Dash was $3 a coin, and last month it hit $120 a coin. Like, I'm an equal opportunity profiteer, right? But like, we should keep in mind that money follows management, and the best developers are working on Bitcoin. And that's why they're working on Bitcoin, is because they're the best. They want to climb the Mount Everest, and they have the skill capacity to do it, so they're racing up it. But if you're a D rate or a C minus rate developer, a bench warmer on the JV team, you're going to go work on Bitcoin Unlimited, or you're going to go work on some other project where you can actually usefully contribute, because that project just isn't operating at the same level.
Yeah, good point, Trace. And I think it's very interesting what we're seeing happen with Litecoin, kind of as a test for Bitcoin. And I think that it'll lend a lot of credibility to SegWit if we see that happen in Litecoin. And I guess my question is, and how hard would it be to get SegWit approved, and would it be a lot easier if we see a successful implementation with Litecoin?
Well, that's one of the reasons we have a lot of these altcoins, is that we can actually test in a real live economic production environment new code. And Charlie Lee, the founder of Litecoin, is very much pro Bitcoin, but he loves the idea of being able to perhaps even do user activated soft fork in Litecoin to see whether they could coordinate it, what types of problems might happen from doing it. They're great test beds, but we should understand, when you want to roll out the real production ready code to a $20 billion market cap coin, you have to be the best, and there's no margin for error. And I mean, Bitcoin Unlimited, they tried to merge in some Bitcoin Core code, and they have buffer overflows, and they have other types of bugs that like knocked half of their nodes off the network. Like, these guys are complete. They're incompetents. Like, wow. You do not want to bet any money behind these guys.
Wow. Dave,
I mean, it's your money to bet, Like, it's your money to bet, but hey, you were warned, right?
Right, and it says a lot coming from you. I would say that much because you were one of the. Go ahead.
Are you really gonna hand the keys to the Ferrari to a 14-year-old who's never driven a car before? Like, no, you don't hand the keys to someone like that. And they're your keys. It's your car.
But the thing about Bitcoin Unlimited is if there's a fork, right? Okay, well there's two problems.
I mean, there's not going to be a fork though, because nobody trusts these clowns.
So first, you're calling them clowns and 14-year-olds. Okay, maybe they are 14-year-old clowns, right? Well, but what I'm thinking is that it doesn't matter if they're 14-year-old clowns. What matters is if Bitcoin Unlimited has a good idea, which is basically blocks should be as big as we want them to be without causing problems. How do you make blocks get as big as we want them to be without causing problems? I think Bitcoin Unlimited has a good idea. And yeah, they have a bunch of 14-year-old clowns implementing it. So we can't use that idea. Well, we can.
No, I mean,
people can start using it, and then, well, you're saying that's not going to happen. But what if it does?
Trace, can I comment on that? Can I comment on that real quick before you do? I think it's a terrible idea, what they're proposing. I think the reason why some people may believe it's a good idea because they have a lot of media behind it trying to tell you that it's a good idea.
Well, and also this point, 14-year-old clown, I mean, those are kind of ad hominem attacks. What I'm trying to get across is they have shipped buggy code as production-ready code. They have released binaries that are closed source. You don't do that in a free open source software where you're generating private keys that control the money. Like, this is just absolutely ridiculous what they've done, right? And in terms of emerging consensus or all this type of stuff, at BitDevs in New York City, I attended one of the debates that they had there where they looked at emerging consensus. And even the people that were pro big blocks and have been for a couple years, who I'm friends with, even they couldn't make any sense of this garbage that was being spouted. And so, all the developers in New York City were pretty much in unanimous agreement that emerging consensus was a bad idea, just on its face. And so, this idea that, there might be something useful there, no, it's all a giant pile of crap. And the problem is that the people standing in the middle of the crap don't even realize they're standing in a giant pile of crap. Okay, so we go to the Bitcoin Core guys, and they're able to tell you, oh man, yeah, that's a giant pile of crap. Stay away from that. You're going to lose your money.
Sure.
And how many implementations have to get shipped with buggy code? I actually think a fork might be a good idea because you know what'll happen? People who make bad choices will lose a lot of money. And that's a great thing because then the money gets to transfer to people who make good choices.
Huh. Tone, I'd like to get your thoughts on something that Roger Ver has complained a lot about, and that is censorship. And it sounds like, the consensus on this call is that everyone is for SegWit and for the Bitcoin Core. And I'm just curious, in your experience and what you understand and what you know about Bitcoin, is there this mass attempt to censor anyone in the Bitcoin Unlimited community?
I personally don't see it that way. I think this whole thing started because one of Roger Ver's posts on our Bitcoin got removed by the moderator. And this moderator has always had this policy, well, we only talk about Bitcoin, we don't talk about alternative coins. So we don't talk about Monero, we don't talk about Ethereum, so we don't talk about these alternatives. If someone is writing about this alternative, we're going to remove those posts. And that moderator has decided that any attempt to hard fork Bitcoin is no different than creating a Dash or an Ethereum or an altcoin.
Or a Litecoin.
Right, or Litecoin, though now they're upset because Litecoin is allowed to be talked about on our Bitcoin, but that's because they're implementing Bitcoin's code, right? So, and one of Roger Ver's posts got removed, and he made a really big deal out of it, and because Roger himself owns a media outlet, it got a huge deal out of it, and it kind of snowballed from there, but I mean, these core developers, like people like me, I'm not even on Reddit. Like I don't know if you are, Trace. Like for some reason, I don't understand how Reddit is even all that relevant to Bitcoin's development. Most people on Reddit don't even know who I am because I don't post on Reddit. It's like its own community. Like none of those people are qualified to, well, maybe not none, but 95% of those people aren't qualified to make decisions for the future of Bitcoin because they're not developers. I am probably not even qualified to make decisions for the code because I'm not a developer. I'm just an economics guy, and I can tell you how bad it will be at any attempt to hard fork Bitcoin with momentum. Ethereum has shown us the way. I'm finally glad that Ethereum exists because it shows us what happens in a contentious hard fork. But
so Tone, you'd say that it was justified censorship, right?
Well, I'm not. It's even debatable if you call it censorship or moderation. A lot of people refer to
whatever.
It as moderation.
It's justified removal of posts.
It was probably justified. I mean, like, if I was the admin, would I have removed it? Probably not. But if that's the policy, then that's the policy. I don't have a problem with what happened on our Bitcoin that started this mess. It didn't bother me at all.
And we should also take, you know, I don't necessarily agree with how Themos has handled the situation, but we do need to take a look at what they're trying to accomplish, right? They want to engage in a hard fork where they change the rules of what Bitcoin currently is to something else. And they want to keep the brand of Bitcoin, right? And because Roger owns fully and operates Bitcoin.com, I don't think he has any claim to saying, I don't get to talk, right? Because he's got a top-ranking Bitcoin site. But what happens, what would happen in this case is you would have this kind of trademark infringement issue because you've got two different things and you're trying to say this one thing is this other thing, and it's confusingly similar, especially to new people coming in, and people could have a chance of losing money with it, right? And so what Themos is doing is he's actually taking a very reasonable stance of protecting new users coming into Bitcoin, because he's saying, hey, look, these are the rules that Bitcoin have followed for 8 years. And that is what Bitcoin is, and that's what you think Bitcoin is, because, you know, that 8 years of brand building and everything. So when somebody comes in and wants to change those rules, those 8 years of rules, but then keep the same name of Bitcoin when something else that's following those rules is operating as Bitcoin, that becomes confusingly similar in trying to usurp or take over some of this brand or this equity, this goodwill that's been built up in the minds of the marketplace and the consumer without having done the hard work to earn that trust. And so that's really what we're talking about.
Well, I see what you're saying, but let me draw a distinction here, because I think you will appreciate this a lot. Okay, so you're saying that Bitcoin is a trademark, and what Themos did to Roger's post by removing it from our Bitcoin was to protect the trademark. And I see that, and that makes sense. But Bitcoin's not a trademark, it's a protocol. And our job partly is to educate people and say, look, it's not a trademark, it's a protocol. And here's another thing, which I think you'll really like, is we as human beings have a solution to that problem. We don't need coercion and authority and censorship and all that. We don't need that. Our solution to that problem is to say, oh, it's unlimited, or oh, it's core. It's unlimited or core. If it branches, there's going to be two branches. Neither one of them is going to be Bitcoin. People are going to, well, Bitcoin, didn't it branch? Okay, that's all negative. Well, why don't we talk about core and talk about unlimited? Because there's two branches, and one of them's core and one of them's unlimited. And everybody who has Bitcoin today is going to be on both of them.
Well, and this is what the exchanges did in a letter, right? They said, hey, if there is a hard fork, we're going to continue listing Bitcoin cores rules as Bitcoin, and we're going to list Unlimited's rules as something else. And so, because we're talking about, like, it's confusingly similar. Somebody sets up a website and they're like, hey, you can buy Bitcoins with a credit card, and you buy the Bitcoins and they show up in your wallet, and you go and send them to BitPay, and BitPay says, hey, we never saw them. Like, that new user has no idea, like, why, but if you're going to sell, if your intent is to sell something that isn't really the real thing, if you're trying to sell fool's gold or you're trying to sell fool's Bitcoin or something, then yeah, you want to create this ambiguity, you want to create this confusion in the marketplace, and doing that by saying one thing is one thing when it isn't actually that thing. And at the end of the day, I agree with you in the terms that, at the end of the day, these are protocols, and each individual decides what a Bitcoin is to them based on the full node that they run. But should we be expecting all new users to be operating at this much kind of higher level of understanding or use of stuff, security, and security? I kind of look at it, if somebody's going to buy $100 worth of Bitcoin, they should put $100 worth of thought into securing the Bitcoin and stuff like that. If somebody's going to buy if someone's going to buy $1 million worth of Bitcoin, they need to put $1 million worth of thought into it. And so I think what Thamos is doing is he's trying to protect the people that are looking at buying 50 or 100 or maybe $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, where they're not looking to put in a serious amount of thought and research and all this stuff. They just want to send their first email. They want to attach their first file. They want to get some technical literacy, but they don't want to move in a huge material amount of money. And so it doesn't really justify, in terms of the cost-benefit analysis, them allocating a bunch of time to develop that human capital and whatnot.
Oh, okay. Let me jump in right here. Okay, hold on. Let me jump in right here. I want to basically go through and get everyone's, final concluding thoughts here. And, you can kind of respond to what we discussed here in the call. But I'll kind of start off, kind of just start you off with this. And based on the conversation that we have, how much confidence do you have in Bitcoin right now and going forward, considering the current events? Here, go ahead. We'll start with you, Tone. We'll go to Trace,
sure,
and then we'll go to Dave.
I'm pretty confident in Bitcoin. I mean, throughout this whole nonsense of Bitcoin Unlimited, I never got scared. I never sold a single Bitcoin. So I am still fairly confident that SegWit will come out as the winner at the end. I think it's fine. And just one last comment on censorship, what happened there between Thamos and deciding that anything Bitcoin Unlimited didn't belong on the Bitcoin forum, that part is debatable, and you can pick sides there. But accusing Bitcoin Core developers of supporting censorship because of something they had no control of or had anything to do with, that's just wrong. And that's what Roger was doing throughout his campaign against censorship.
Trace, you've had some pretty bullish calls on Bitcoin, all the way up to $1 million potentially, right? I wanna kind of get your thoughts here on where we're at, and do you still have that same sort of confidence down the line? And I guess you have a situation now where it really is infinite amount of digital currencies and competition for Bitcoin, and do you really see that much money entering the Bitcoin space?
Yeah, especially if it retains this digital gold use case, which is the primordial one. And actually, it was on Future Money Trends. I was the first person to publicly make the case for a $2 to $5 million Bitcoin price. And then a week later, Rick Valveen, separately and independently, came up with a similar figure. In terms of, I'm still very, very bullish on Bitcoin. I think this whole debate, it's been great. It's showing how much Bitcoin's growing, how resilient it is. And I don't even harbor any ill will towards Jihan, because if anything, he's going against this monopoly, government-enforced monopoly patent in a surreptitious way that hopefully might help secure Bitcoin even more, right? And in a way, the Bitcoin network or the core devs, we should try to protect with the protocol as much as possible miners that are attempting to mine against the will of any type of governmental institution or organization. Like, I think that should be a priority, because that will lower the cost or barrier to entry for miners, right? If we build stuff in that makes it helps protect them against state actors. So, I think that it's great to have entrepreneurs in the mining space, and it's great for them to use every means at their disposal to help make an extra buck, because what that does is it increases the competition, which makes mining even more competitive, which makes the Bitcoin network even more secure. So, I'm very bullish for Bitcoin in the long term. I think that SegWit will get activated. It's just a matter of time. I'm not necessarily in favor of a user-activated soft fork. I think it'd just be way too much to coordinate all at the same time. But I do think it should be on the table, and that we should be considering it and discussing it, and maybe even gathering votes in favor of it in concept. Like if we have BitPay saying, hey, look, we'll add our 500,000 transactions a month to a user-acted soft fork, and then Bitfinex, and you can go on down the line, and all these people saying we'll support it in concept or in theory. Then all of a sudden, if you've got 93% of the network, like currently is running SegWit compatible code, then it's like, hey, look, these economic actors really want this. So, then the miners might be like, well, I guess we better do this, or we're just gonna start getting orphaned or whatever. So all of this is just growing pains. All of it is great. Bitcoin's got all the network effects. We've got the speculation. We've got the merchants. We've got the consumers. We've got the miners. We've got the developers. We've got the financialization. We've got the world reserve currency, settlement currency status, even taking place with stuff like Liquid right now. Like, it is full steam ahead, and this is great. It's and I don't see this current scaling debate as, or even, I guess it's now become an covert ASIC boost debate. I don't see it lasting all that much longer. If it lasts another year or two, like, that's fine. And I don't see any other altcoins surpassing Bitcoin's network effects anytime soon either. Dash, which is the next closest, think about this. They have $400 a day of transaction fees. People that are actually willing to pay to use that network. This is like the number 4 or 5 altcoin, right? Bitcoin has $250,000 a day being spent on transaction fees. Like, it's not even close. Like, the next competitor is not even close to Bitcoin right now in terms of transaction fees that are being paid to use the network. And I like transaction fees because those are actual economic costs that people are paying to use the network. Like back when we had the internet bubble, page views don't matter. Orders don't even necessarily matter, because you can have a ton of orders, but you can be losing money on every order, right? What we need orders that are profitable. Like, how much net income are we actually making? And we look at transaction fees in US dollars, and that helps us kind of look at the Bitcoin network in terms of like a net income number for it. And so I don't see any other network out there that's got the scalability, the security, the liquidity, and the amount of money that people are paying to use it. I just don't see it out there.
Yeah.
And so why are they paying to use Bitcoin? Because it's useful, and they're willing to pay for it.
Hey Trace, fees are important. Imagine how much more efficient our emails would be if all those spam emails that we get had like a little fee attached to them. Hopefully that's where the world will head in about 10 years after we get Lightning Network and stuff.
Well, I think that highlights just how difficult it is to displace a protocol once the protocol starts to get entrenched. I mean, look at SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. You've only got sender and receiver, right? Like in terms of network effects. Dr. Adam Back, who's cited in the Tor white paper and the Bitcoin white paper, like part of his proof of work was to be applied to email. You know, proof of work is the part cited in the Bitcoin white paper. Part of that was to be applied to Bitcoin applied to email to stop spam. But being able to actually displace the SMTP protocol, even with a huge upgrade like that, which would totally get rid of this spam issue, wasn't able to usurp it. So, like, you think that some altcoin is going to be able to overcome Bitcoin's 7 network effect all taking place at the same time? I just don't see it happening. Not anytime soon.
Yeah, real interesting thoughts there, and interesting to bring up the transaction costs on Bitcoin as a metric, and you made some good points as to why that's important. Dave, you brought up Litecoin. You said you sold your Litecoin. You know, obviously it's gone up some. Let's get your confidence on where we are with Bitcoin here and some concluding thoughts.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to say the idea of protecting the brand of Bitcoin by deleting a post which talks about doing something with Bitcoin which would cause a hard fork, that, let's just say, deleting information is I want to say it's a statist strategy. It's a strategy used by people that don't really have respect for everybody else. If people are intelligent and somebody spews out some BS, you want all the intelligent people, you expect them to see the BS and recognize it, whatever it is. And if it's hard to recognize, then you explain it. So that, and Tone's been doing this. Tone reads lots of stuff and he says, well, this looks like BS, and he explains it, which is awesome. And that's what we should be doing. And there is and has been a forum for a long time called Bitcoin Talk, and it was awesome. And it's not anymore, and that's because that strategy is being used. We can't let people see BS, so we're censoring it basically. And it destroyed that. It destroyed that forum. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who are still using it. That's all great. Well, because you're kind of in a walled garden. It's beautiful, but all of the creatures that can't get in, they're not benefiting from the garden, and the garden's not benefiting from them. And that's, to me, that sucks. And that's why I'm kind of passionate about this whole censorship idea. So, but you asked me what's my faith in Bitcoin. Oh, like I said, I sold all my Litecoin because the price went up, and I think Bitcoin will stay ahead of Litecoin. That's my guess, which is why I don't have any Litecoin anymore. But I could be wrong, So, what else? Why do I think Bitcoin is going to last even with all these problems? Because, the network effect, it's entrenched. There is the great transaction fees the miners are earning and all that. I'm out. I don't know what else to say.
Good deal. Well, hey, guys, it was a pleasure for me to speak with all of you, and I know the audience is going to appreciate it. And it's very important to have these conversations here and to know what to do with our digital currency. It's still such a new thing when you consider, when Bitcoin came online here, and we have baby boomers that are just barely, they're still reading the newspaper, and to be able to wrap their minds around Bitcoin, man, it's such a difficult thing. And if we split it in two, I can definitely see how mass confusion can really set in. And even the conversation we had today, it was, a lot of things are technical. A lot of things are going to go over people's heads. And it's that education of really people wrapping their minds around these concepts that's going to continue to make it more and more acceptable. So again, thanks.
Can
Jump
I say
on
something else?
Sure.
Because I was looking forward to this conversation because I wanted to find out from Tone Tone, I asked you what was the problems that you see with Bitcoin Unlimited, and it all comes down to the inexperience of the developers. And the problem that I have with that is I like the idea of letting the blocks find the right size, letting the system find the right size. And it can't right now. It is clipping at 1 megabyte. It clips. It just stops. And, we're dead. We can't do a lot of transactions. And of course, if it could go as high, nobody would have any reason to, pay a transaction fee. Well, think about that. That's not true. You still want it in there. The miners don't want 30 megabyte blocks. That's too big, probably. I don't know.
Well, that's the thing. Sorry, I just want to comment real quick. We don't have time to get into all of it. You're right. We don't know, but what we do know is that even a month ago, half the miners weren't even mining 1 megabyte blocks. They were clipping it themselves at like 700 or 800 kilobytes. So if they're not willing to mine full blocks when they think that the mempool is full, how are you going to trust them to have bigger blocks? Also, if blocks get too big...
Wait. Ask me, if you're going to ask me a question, well, let me answer it. I don't need to trust them not to have blocks that are too big. Was that your question? Because that's not a trust thing.
No, I didn't have a question, but nobody knows, and it's too dangerous to find out. In addition, having miners in China mine big blocks of 2 or 3 megabytes, it gives them a gigantic advantage of mining the following block. Because while everyone else is trying to validate what they've done as that larger block moves throughout the world, they have already started mining the following block. It's a huge danger that has lots of papers written about it that could lead to complete and total centralization of mining by one player. It's just too dangerous to go there.
That's great. This is a debate that should be on BitcoinTalk.org, and it's not. Do you see why I say that sucks? Because we could, like you said, we don't have time, but we could do 5-minute blocks. We could do block every 5 minutes instead of 10. There's lots of ways to fix this problem, but we're not talking about it because we don't have time and we can't do it on BitcoinTalk.org.
5-minute blocks are also very, very dangerous. I mean, if you ask some of our core developers, they would tell you that 10-minute blocks is too long.
You don't have time to discuss this, right?
Right. They will tell you that maybe 20 or 30-minute block time would have been a better choice for Satoshi, and there's lots of scientific reasons for that.
Okay, guys. Yeah, and go ahead, Trace.
And at the end of the day, if this were if larger blocks or faster blocks or any of this stuff, if this actually mattered, if the market really wanted this, then we would see another blockchain that has these features with transaction fees starting to pile up.
If the dialogue was open, yes.
But this is not. These are advanced topics. They're not for Reddit. They're not Reddit topics. This is the scaling debates that take place twice a year somewhere in the world. I mean, these are advanced topics, need to be discussed by senior people in code development. These should not be Reddit discussions.
But just looking at the market, nobody is paying for this stuff right now. Nobody's paying for it. Dogecoin, what are our Dogecoin transaction fees? Litecoin, what are those transaction fees? Nobody's paying for larger blocks. Nobody's paying for faster blocks. That is not a market demand that people are willing to pay for right now. What they're paying for is 1 megabyte blocks that have a lot of security. And so you're talking about wanting to bring a board level discussion, because that's what core devs work on, right? It's board level stuff.
Exactly. That's and so
you're trying to bring a board,
not necessarily Reddit.
Right. Yeah, but you're trying to bring a board level. You're trying to bring a board level discussion on a topic or an issue where there's no revenue stream. It's irrelevant. It doesn't even need to be discussed. So you can go discuss it. But
why is Bitcoin Unlimited a threat at all?
It's not. And the market has shown that it's not a threat. And XT was not a threat. Classic's not a threat. Unlimited's not a threat. None of the the market doesn't take any of these seriously, and they're taking them even less and less seriously the more they implode on themselves, showing that they have all types of bugs in production level shipped software.
Well, isn't Litecoin a counterexample?
Isn't Litecoin what?
A counterexample?
What are Litecoin's daily transaction fees in US dollars?
I think somebody said $400, right? Or was that Dash?
Dash is $400.
Yeah.
Litecoin is still just a small altcoin where you test stuff. But we're talking about a network with $20 billion market cap with $250,000 of transaction fees. Not everybody who wants to talk needs to be listened to. All the creatures like in the garden? No, you don't bring trolls into the garden. You don't bring trolls into the boardroom. Because they don't have anything useful to add, and they suck up our only commodity that we can't buy more of, and that's time. Right? Time is the only commodity you can't buy.
Hey, Trace, let me just comment on one thing. The reason Bitcoin Unlimited is a bigger threat than all the others is because Roger Ver and Bitcoin.com is behind it and supporting it. That's the only reason why it's taking, the community longer to get rid of this most recent hostile threat to fork Bitcoin than the two prior ones.
Yeah, but we look at, you poor Roger. You kind of look at what the general reputation appears to be, and the longer he's in that briar patch, the more painful it seems to be getting.
All right, guys. Man, passionate discussion here, and that's why we're doing this. Again, thanks Tone Vays, Trace Mayer, and Dave Scotese. Appreciate all of you guys' time today, and I know the audience does as well, answering a lot of questions that are on a lot of our minds. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Kenneth.
Yeah, thanks, man. Good times.
Thanks, guys.